Alright, so let's get started coding. But before I start coding and deleting some of these um, boilerplate items that came with the create next app command, let me go over one more thing. And I never really got to go over this API piece, this API folder. But Next.js comes with the opportunity for you to create an API within Next.js. So as you can see from this code, this is the hello.js file, and you can see there's a function called handler. And what this is going to do is that when we get to the specific routes, it's going to return a JSON of John Doe, a name called John Doe, and it's going to return a status of 200. So we kind of went over routes a little bit in our original video. And what I said was that when you create a folder in this pages folder, when you create a child folder within it, it's essentially saying that you're adding to your URL. And when you get to this endpoint, or when it gets to this endpoint, say for instance in this case is API, it's going to see, okay, you have a hello.js, and it's saying when you get to that specific route, return this JSON. So that's pretty much how our routes are going to work in the future. If I create a folder called to do, and within that to do, I'm saying, okay, output or show this specific page when I get to that specific route of to do. It's going to do that. In this case, you can essentially create an API because in this case, it's returning a JSON of a name John Doe. And we can see that in action. If I do npm run dev, it's going to start up on the route of 3000. If I go to localhost 3000 and the folder was API, so if I put API and I do /hello because the name of the file was hello, boom, you'll see that it's going to return a name, a JSON of name, a key value of name, and the value is going to be John Doe, just like this, as expected. So essentially this can be a REST API. Like if you create a specific endpoint and you return a specific response, that's essentially a REST API. So it's possible in Next.js. As an engineer, I usually like to extract things. So I personally wouldn't use this API functionality, but Next.js provides the ability to do that if needed. So I just want to show that before I start deleting some of these files. If you do want to create an API internally, you can, but I'm not going to do that in this case. We're just going to leverage our Spring Boot API for this project. And yeah, let's get started. So I'm going to delete this, and let me just close this out. I'm going to delete this API folder. I'm going to go into this index.js, and I'm essentially going to just delete everything within here. And I'm also going to just delete this as well. And I'm just going to start off with some div tags. And I'm going to delete this as well. And we're not using any of these, so we might as well delete it as well. So now it's just bare bones index.js. If I start this up again and I go to localhost 3000, I should see just a straight up black screen because there's nothing to output here and we just erased everything. So now let's actually get started with some coding. So on my demo, it was simply going to be a initial screen of a header and a button to go to the next page. So that's exactly what I'm going to do here. But before that, let me actually create a new folder. I don't want to create it in pages. I want to create it in like the root folder. I'm going to call this folder, and I'm going to press this button right here that pretty much allows me to create a folder in VS Code. It says right here, new folder. And I'm going to call that new folder components. I'm not going to use this right now, but in the future, we're going to need a place to put our components. Like I said in the initial portion of the video, a component is just a small piece of reusable code. So we're going to need to make components such as the tax, the to-do card. We're going to need a component to display the to-dos in a list format, and stuff like that. So I'm just going to create this folder, anticipating that I'm going to use that in the future. But for this first piece, I'm going to just make a pretty basic home page. And in this div, I just know automatically that I want to make sure that everything within this div tag is centered in the middle of the page and that it's stacked up on top of each other. So I know I can use the style, right, piece to start putting it in a format that I expect. So I'm gonna do a display type of flex, right? And I am going to use justify content, and I got to put a comma after here. I'm gonna use justify content, and I am going to say, okay, make this center, and also align the items center. So it's gonna horizontally and vertically align the items in the center. I'm gonna make sure that the height of this container, or the height of this div, is gonna be 100 VH, meaning that it's gonna fill up the whole screen. And I always forget to put a comma after each one, but and then one more thing is I'm gonna make sure that the flex direction, so that means each item inside of this div is gonna be of type column, because I want to make sure each individual piece on this page is stacked up on top of each other. I don't want them to be in a row next to each other. I want them to be on top of each other, because I am going to have a header and I'm going to have a button, but I want that on top of each other. So now we can save that, and you're not going to see anything. It's just still going to be a black screen, but let's start actually adding things inside. So I'm going to start leveraging the UI library called Mantine to use a container, right? We talked about container, and I can actually go to Mantine right now, and we can see what exactly a container is. So let's go to a container, and remember, a container just centers content horizontally with a predefined max width. We did create a parent, I guess you can call it a container, but I just use the div to make sure that everything within the div is centered. But this will also allow us to center our content horizontally and assign a width if needed. So let's use a container, and we already npm installed Mantine, so we should see right here, and open that up. And what I'm going to do is I am going to also use another div, because I am going to assign some styles to it. So I want to make sure that the text that I'm about to use is within a div. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the text "let's to do it" and save that. And I want to see, as you can see, one of the things that Next.js provides is refresh on updates. So it's constantly going to update when you save. And if I go back, let me go back to localhost 3000, we see "let's to do it" in the middle of the screen. Obviously the background is black. We can change that, but we see that it's showing some text. You probably can't see that. Let me zoom in. Boom, "let's to do it." Hopefully I don't get sued by Nike, but anyway, let's make the background white. Oops, color, and we're gonna make this white, and boom, that fixes that. But now we can't see the text because it's white, so we're gonna start adding some styles to this text. That's why I put in this div file. You could use the style here, but honestly I just like putting it in the divs. I just wanted to use the container to format it properly, but I could put some styles here in this div. And what we're gonna do, and honestly you could also extract this into CSS, but because this is such a simple home page, I'm just gonna put it in line. But you could create a CSS file for each individual style piece and put in here. And I actually forgot to delete this as well, but it's fine. So let's do font size. Let's change the font size to 40. Let's make the font weight, let's make it bolder. Let's make the font family what we just received from Google, and that is going to be the Rubik Vinyl. Oop, what a V? Vinyl. And then let's make the color black, because we couldn't see anything because we just made the background white. So we're going to make the color equal to black. Let's save that. Let's go back, and boom, we see "let's to do it." Perfect. And like I said, you don't have to use this text. That's just the text I'm using. You're just following a tutorial. You can, be as free as you can. I'm just showing, how to use some of this stuff. So now we're going to create another container, right? Because I want to make sure these are separate entities. So we're going to create another container, and now we're going to put a button. And like I said, we could have just put all these styles into this container, but you don't necessarily have to. All right, I usually like putting it into divs, but it's all convention. But one thing for sure, I do want to make sure that, well, first let me put this button. I'll show what exactly I mean. But we're gonna take a button from Mantine, and we're going to open that up, and we're gonna put go to to-dos, because this is gonna direct us to another page. And let's save that, right? And we're gonna see that, okay, it gives us a blue button. It says go to to-dos, and it's pretty close to the prompt that we just created. I don't like that. So what we could do is start defining some styles, right? The first thing that I want to do is, we know that this button is within the container. So I just want to make sure that I'm pushing against this header. So I'm going to push this button down, but I'm also pushing. You could like think of hands, right? If you had hands and someone's really close to you, right? You use your hands and you extend it. You push against the thing that's in really close to you. So I'm going to use margin to push this container down, right? So I can say in this container, I want to create a style, and I'm going to make that equal to margin top, and a good number I want to say is 35, right? So essentially what we're saying with margin is, and you can see let's make it 25. Essentially what we're saying is, I got this button, it was very close to this header. I want to push against this header and push myself down 25, right? So that's exactly what I did, right? And it looks better, in my opinion. Not too close, not too far. It's 25 away. So now we're gonna have this button, and I don't like this blue color. I want to be different. I want it to look, good. So we're gonna make some changes here. We're going to first, let's go to actually Mantine and see what are the options for a button. All right, cool. So you see, originally by default, it's gonna be this blue color. Let me zoom in a little bit. It's gonna be this blue color, and I don't really like it. All right. If you go down here though, you see that there are variants, right? We can make it subtle. We can make it light. We can make it filled. We could also add a gradient if we want to. I like these gradients, and I specifically like this green gradient. All right, so that's what I want. And how do I get this green gradient? Okay, this is the second button. So if I go to the second button right here, I can see that what it's doing is that it's creating a button with a variant of gradient, and the gradient is going to be from teal to lime, and it's giving it a specific degree. All right, and you can see that it's putting the name of lime green. So this is the one that we're looking for. So that's what I'm about to do. I'm going to create a button with a variant equal to gradient, and I'm going to make sure that the gradient property knows that I am trying to make a gradient from teal to lime, and the degree is 105. And if I save that and I go back to my localhost 3000, ew, that looks disgusting. That looks disgusting. So what's the difference here? Oh, it's so weird. Oh, okay. All right, so I actually found the bug here. I didn't spell from properly. That's awkward. So let me save that, and if I go back, boom, I get exactly what I want. You gotta pay attention to these naming conventions, right? So now we have the button that we wanted. We have the header. Essentially, the home page is finished. So now we just have to create a way of when we click this, it's going to go exactly to where we want it to go. So how do we do that? Well, we can use a hook, and Next provides a way of you know, using a hook to push us to the route that we're looking for. So we're going to use a hook right now, and we're going to do const router equal to the use router, right? And this is going to allow us to use a method that will allow us to push us to a specific URL that we want to go to. In this case, this go to dos, we wanted to push us to the to-dos that that we created or that we're about to create. The page that's going to allow us to create to-dos and see our to-dos. So this is a button. So we know that we can use the on click. All right, and let me put this. Actually, we don't even need this margin, but just put this on another line so it's easier to see. And we're going to use the on click, and we're going to make that equal to this function. So we know that on click we'll do a router.push, and we're going to push to a specific URL, right? We're going to push to do or /to do. So we're about to actually make a route for the to-dos called /to do. But essentially what it's saying is when we click on this button, we're going to push to /to do. So so we already know this is going to be the initial page, so it's going to be just localhost 3000. But when we click on the button, it's going to push us to localhost 3000 /to do. So we can see this in action. And actually, let me import use router, because this is coming from the next. This comes like from next, so we just got to import it. And you can see it come from next /router. And currently we don't have the to do route, but we can still click it, and it should force our page to go to a route that we don't even have, but we should still see the action. So click it, and boom. Next by default provides some exception handling, so it's going to say we don't have this page, but you can see in the URL it's going to localhost 3000 /to do. So it's doing what it's intended to do. And it's cool to see that Next.js provides a way of making sure that this is handled. If a user goes to a page that doesn't exist or try to manipulate the URL in a way that they're not supposed to, at least we know that we'll see a message that shows that this page cannot be found. So now let's actually start doing some routing and getting the do page to be shown.